how do two people with very different backgrounds come together to focus on organizational culture?
That's a good question. It was interesting because, Dan and I both professionally speak, and we found ourselves speaking to the same healthcare organization. And we got together and I think became really quick friends, and also realized that we had, a lot of common acquaintances. Is really where the relationship began.
Yeah, actually, it was sort of destined, I think, because we happened to be in the same place, same time. I spoke earlier that day in much more of an educational session with board members and CEOs, and Ben came later and actually did a very nice job with the dinner entertainment, and I could tell. At that moment, we had sort of a convergence of views on the topic of culture,
right,
based upon my listening to you, and you hadn't listened to me at all. And I thought there's something here
there, right,
that we can't let escape this moment.
Well, yeah, and then we had that chance shared car ride to the airport, where we downloaded this ideology behind the fact that culture really can produce winning teams. It can produce powerful outcomes, not only in athletic organizations, but in healthcare organizations. So,
as a follow-up to that, I do an interview series with healthcare leaders primarily. I did an interview with Ben, and as I was writing up the interview, I thought there's really something here that's quite fundamental and missing, at least from the healthcare industry marketplace. So it just happened from there.
So what do you believe to be true about culture?
I've spent 30 years of a career in healthcare in organizations of all sizes in the United States and abroad, and in various cultures abroad. And the most fundamental part of everything I've seen is culture as the soul of an organization. And you can focus on the strategy, and you can focus on the finance, and you can focus on operations and all the stuff that's important to running a healthcare organization. And I spent years doing it myself and teaching it for more years. But what escapes most leaders is the essence of culture, but also how it's made practical in an organization, and that's what Ben sparked in me when we talked about the practicality of culture from a professional championship sports team and healthcare.
Yeah. That word practicality is really the key, because it's what I experienced in the NFL. We've talked about this. It's the idea that you can actually choose your culture, right? I think there's this kind of myth that, well, culture just happens and you can't really do anything about it, and then behaviors come out of that culture. But I think one of the things that Tony Dungy taught me was this reality that you can, as we call it in Keystone, the 4 Ds. You can decide your culture, right? And then you can design it, you can deploy it, and then, honestly, most importantly, you can manage it. You can direct this culture throughout your organization. And that's what happened in Indianapolis. And I really believe what made us so successful is we practiced a well-defined, practical culture that led to championship results.
What caught my attention, actually, probably more than anything on that car ride, was when you said we actually practiced, or we had a culture of the huddle.
Yeah.
A culture of the huddle. And I'm thinking, these guys are pros playing on the biggest stage ever. They probably started playing football from age 4.
Right.
And prior to the Super Bowl, they're practicing the huddle, and there's a whole culture of the huddle.
It's so true. I mean, it's one of the things that I know as fans, I think they take for granted the most is the huddle, right? Who thinks about the huddle? But the reality is, in Indianapolis, especially when you're in the Peyton Manning offense, the most important foundational aspect to a successful play or a successful drive is the huddle. And so one of the first periods of every single practice that I was ever in Indianapolis was practicing getting in and out of the huddle and practicing being a champion listener while you're in the huddle. And again, it's that well-defined culture of what's expected and when you perform that, how it leads to success on the field.
Yeah, and I suspect we'll delve into this more as we go forward. But also in our initial car ride, I connected that concept of practice, culture, practice, culture.
Yeah.
And I thought, really, you were practicing. You learned how to practice a culture.
Yep.
And as you had explained it, that was really core to what Tony Dungy is. And I happen to be at Minnesota with Tony Dungy.
Yeah, right.
So, I watched him grow up with a lot of people. And you think about that concept that's it's elusive in healthcare organization, and that is the practicing of a culture.
So where's the common ground between professional football and healthcare?
Well, maybe I should...
Contact?
Full contact and people yelling at each other
Right.
all the time. Actually, let's scroll back a little bit. Even the languages, or the languages are similar. As with professional football and healthcare, there are huddles.
Yep.
Clinicians have huddles. There are handoffs.
Yep.
There are fumbles. There are dropped passes or dropped contacts along the way. And it's fascinating to me, growing up in healthcare organizations, when you hear an NFL player talking about what you do,
Sure.
the crosswalk is interesting. Beyond that, you've got elite players,
Right,
highly trained, highly
business
practiced.
side. Yeah, you've got that business side, like you said. I mean, it's very defined positions, right? On the football field, just on the offense alone, there's 11 different roles, and each player has a very specific specialty. Well, specialties are an incredibly important part of healthcare. And, I think as you and I have really begun to build this business, I mean, we've seen so much common ground between what does it take to create a winning team on the field and its similarities to creating a winning team in a healthcare organization.
Yeah. And as we've gone forward building this, I've tested this on a number of physicians, and I come from backgrounds where you've got highly specialized, highly trained, noteworthy physicians. And we've talked about the parallels of an NFL team, NFL championship players, and a championship healthcare team. And when I talked to physicians about that, and I was a little tentative at first, it was amazing how they said, I get that. That makes sense to me. And you were referring how the play happens in 4.6 seconds.
Right.
Well, a lot of important things in healthcare happen in 4.6 seconds.
And you got to make the right decisions. And a lot of the right decisions made in Indianapolis on the football field only came because of a practice culture that really taught us how to do that the right way.
So Ben, can you explain what being in the Super Bowl is like and how culture played a role? Wow.
So hard to put into words what it was like to win a Super Bowl. It started in a small Scandinavian town of Lindstrom, Minnesota, playing catch in the backyard with my dad. And to think, that years later, really one of my, I don't know, it was a culmination of a dream since being a little boy. You don't imagine going from a small Minnesota town to playing in front of 101 million people. And so it was pretty incredible. But what was so special, two things that really come to mind that were so special about Indianapolis is that Coach Dungy was very clear that he wanted to create a family culture, a family environment. And an acronym that's used often in athletics for family is forget about me, I love you. And it's this idea of really finding true value, true love for the people that you work with. And when you can do that, especially within a team environment, that's when you build trust. That's when you build loyalty. That's when you get people excited to come into work every day. And the second is this word faith, right? Which can be scary because of what you believe it's connected to. But in Indianapolis, faith was not about religion. It was about getting a group of 53 guys from 53 different parts of the country to believe in each other. And so, we talk about how faith is really freedom for all individuals to trust and hope in each other. And when you define it and you practice that, your result is a family. And that's what was created in Indianapolis. And I really think it's the edge that we had as a team to overcome so many other great teams that year in the NFL. But we were a family, and that was pretty special.
And as I've observed in my career, the best of the best medical teams, they are truly teams. It is never one person. It is never one person that makes a difference. When the chips are down and it's your child or it's your spouse being wheeled into that operating room, you want to make sure that team knows what they're doing.
Yeah.
At a split second, they trust in each other, they have faith in each other.
Absolutely.
They believe in each other because while you were playing on a stage of 100 million, these teams play on a small stage of life and death.
Absolutely.
And that's where culture is,
Critical.
I believe, critical to the success.
Yeah.
So Dan, with 30 years of experience in healthcare, you've seen it all. How has culture won and lost championships for different organizations?
Culture wins when the leader takes it on as his or her principal responsibility. And I've seen this. And you can have the best strategy, you can have the best financial plan, you can even have the best staff. But the secret sauce in all of that's the culture. And if you're the leader, whether you're Tony Dungy, whether you're Peyton, whether you're you, the fact is that the secret sauce is the culture. Yeah. My guess is pretty much every NFL team has the same playbook or pretty close. You all got the same players, you're on the field at the same time, the rules are the same. So what distinguishes a winner from a loser? So back to the question. As I've watched healthcare organizations succeed wildly and fail miserably, it's never been because they didn't have a strategy. It's never been because they didn't have a good financial executive. It's that secret sauce they miss, the culture.
Yeah.
So at year 30 in my career, I'd rather spend my time on that piece of the secret sauce than financial plans and strategies.
Well, and that secret sauce, I mean, I can relate in the NFL. I went from playing for a perennial playoff team, Super Bowl championship Indianapolis Colts, to a couple years with the Cincinnati Bengals, who struggled, hadn't won a playoff game in over 18 years when I was there. So you ask, well, like you said, there was a lot of talent on both teams, very similar plays on both teams. So what was the difference? And it was culture.
So what is the mission of Keystone Culture Group?
The mission is the cultures of our clients. You know, if we can come in and we can affect the culture of an organization positively, and we can teach them that. We can teach them how to define it. We can teach them how to design it. We can teach them how to deliver it and direct it and practice it. And it becomes tangible for them. It can be taught to others in the organization. And frankly, when you look at the difference between organizations that win and lose, it is usually those with, it is always those with the strongest cultures have a team underneath that leader that has faith, that has confidence, and they're willing to deliver for that leader because the culture is strong.
It's awesome. And what's so cool is when companies are able to define what that culture is, build a system that they can practice, that becomes replicatable. And you can now take that belief system and you can integrate it through your network, and that's sustainable. and we're excited to kind of bring that system into people's organizations.
Yeah, and after 30 years, and I'm certainly a lot older than Ben, and frankly, I have no time anymore or absolute no tolerance for the CEO that says, well, you know, culture is something I bring in later on. It's ethereal. Nobody can really define it. Wrong. You can define it.
Yeah.
You can practice it. You can implement it. It becomes the most important tool in the toolbox of leaders, and that, from my perspective, is not arguable.
Mm-hmm.
So what are the hopes and goals for the business?
Well, I think we both found a common passion for culture, and we believe that you can actually choose it, and create it and implement it, and that it's going to affect. Really going to affect the bottom line. It affected it in the NFL for me, and I know that you've taught me that it affects it in healthcare organizations. And so, really, for me, we want to help organizations become the best that they can possibly be, especially within healthcare, because lives are on the line. And so, really, for me, the hopes and goals for Keystone Culture Group is to become a leader in the creation and implementation of culture that can completely catapult companies to new potential that they didn't realize they had. And that's exciting to think about.
And when I speak to the CEOs and the governing boards around the country, many of the individuals I know well, I talk to them about the conventional, the traditional, the plans and strategies. But when I hit culture, I watch them all light up. And invariably, they will say, if you've got something there, bring it. Just bring it. And I think that's a place where, based on our collective experience and belief system, we can do something worthwhile.
Absolutely.